when I look at some of the things that are being published, there was a story 10 days ago that said this is the worst April for the stock market since the Great Depression. 10 days later, the NASDAQ is now up on the month of April, and I haven't seen a story that says, oh, stock market has biggest bounce back ever. So
it certainly has gone back and forth.
I think a lot of this is media driven.
Inflation is down, rates are down, gas prices are down. I think what you're going to see, and I think what was revealing in Scott Bessent's interview, is the next 100 days, which is the rebuilding 100 days, which is cutting deals on the tariffs, which is calming people down as far as where we're going in the economy, the tax cuts that are probably likely coming to the economy. I think the one thing you can say about President Trump is that he's doing exactly with what he said he was going to do.
For the longest time, I've been saying that, Trump's been trying to tell the American people not to panic. Currently, his favorability with the economy is underwater right now. But many people believe that we're heading in the right direction with Donald Trump. Now, the media wants to talk about Trump's unfavorability, but they don't want to talk about Democrats' unfavorability. And this is the funny part. The Democrats' unfavorability is around 26% right now. But I digress. You already see Donald Trump is trying to, inflation's coming down, but the economy is bad. Why? Because it's media driven. That's why I led in with the Scott Bessett's intro to his video. And I think that this interview, and I talked about it earlier to this channel about how media, they're just there to create narratives. And I think this interview is a great example of that this fear that's going on in the market. This is one of the reasons why I was like, the minute I saw this fear, I went in my phone. I put not a large sum, but I put a certain amount of money into my investments account and start just picking up stocks for cheap, because I'm seeing this, like, I invest in the long term. I invest 10 years out. Like, I don't plan to sell my stock until 10 years after I buy it. So when you have this long-term kind of mindset, you don't get affected by the media-driven fear-mongering that's going on in between. And you saw from the intro, Scott Bessent called out the media saying, hey, this fear of the economy, this bad perception that the American people have on the economy is media driven. And I 100% agree with that, because if you look at the facts, hey, it bounced back, but they don't report on that. The same way in my last video, I talked about how Donald Trump put money aside to rebuild housing in Western North Carolina. The media don't cover that. Anything positive for Trump, anything that could be used as Trump benefit, the liberal journalists, which journalism is the most liberal profession in the U.S., they will not highlight those stories because they want to maintain a negative perception on Trump. And this interview highlights exactly the motive. I'm prescribing motive on a lot of these liberal news outlets, hell, and a lot of these journalists. Because in my view, I said this constantly on this channel, if you're new here, journalism is activism now in modern politics. But I digress. Let's get into the interview.
Trump's strategy really has been to announce these tariffs and dial some back, pause them, make exceptions. Explain why you see this as a good negotiating strategy.
Well, in game theory, it's called strategic uncertainty. So you're not going to tell the person on the other side of the negotiation where you're going to end up. And nobody's better at creating this leverage than President Trump. He's shown the high tariffs, and here's the stick. This is where the tariffs can go, and the carrot is come to us, take off your tariffs, take off your non-tariff trade barriers, stop manipulating your currency, stop subsidizing labor and capital, and then we can talk. But I tell you, Martha, that we've had several of these Asian countries that come in and said, oh, well, we'll stop doing this, this, and this. And I look at these lists, and I think, how did we get here? How did we get here? Because this trading system has been so unfair. And as President Trump says, I don't blame the countries. I blame the previous administrations that let them get away with it.
And this is a narrative that the media don't want to contend with, is that this is not a narrative. Hey, look, the trade deals that we have on the table, it's not really productive for it's America, its economy, and its workers. We need to have a better terms on the trade deal. What is wrong with Donald Trump making an approach that will give us long-term a better trade agreement for our country? What is the negatives of that? And you see why I'm thinking in 10 years. Okay, I'm gonna invest, I'm gonna sell my stock in 10 years, not in a day. This is why I'm not a day trader. I read day trading books. I have investment books behind me too. It's not just politics. I have investment books too. So if someone, a president of the United States, is going back and of seeing all the unfair trade deficits. Canada takes advantage of us by a couple $1 billion a year, and Trump says, "Yo, this is unfair. You're ripping off Americans." And Canada goes back, "Well, if you change the terms of our agreement, you'll bankrupt Canada." It sounds like Canada needs to be the 51st state of the United States of America. That's where the joke comes from. Well, where's the lie? Where's the lie? If you have to rip me off to sustain your lifestyle, sounds like sounds like you're more. What that tells you? What does that tell you? And this is why I'm trying to get people to think more in the terms of long term. Stop evaluating Trump based on day to day. It took two years for Biden to wreck the economy. You have to give Trump at least 1 year to try to fix something before you make a judgment. And I think the media is trying to push the American voter to give a rush judgment on Donald Trump so they have a negative thing to report on. Because it seems like that's the only thing these journalists are interested in reporting on. Negativity on Trump. But I digress. Let's continue with Scott Best's response.
Mr. Secretary, look at what you just heard from Barton O'Brien there. The administration says it's worried about Main Street, not Wall Street. But you heard that small businessman saying his inventory in China might as well be lit on fire because already what has happened and the concern about what's happening next. How do they plan for things if they don't know what's going to happen?
Well, what they know is that the China tariffs are unsustainable because the Chinese cannot sustain this. That if the...
Sorry, I'm going to geek out real quick. China's economy, their people are not known for spending a lot of money. First off, right there, the full stop right there. In China, the Chinese citizens, they don't like to spend money like that compared to us. We're responsible, I believe, about 39. I could be wrong here. Someone can probably give me the actual number in the comment section. But China, I believe the American market is responsible for consuming about 33% of consumer goods. We're the largest consumers for China. That means if China doesn't have access to our market, that's a 33% drop in their exports leaving China. You don't think that's a lot of leverage for the United States of America? Now, for the U.S., what we're trying to do strategically is, and Apple saw this coming, and they're trying to do this too. We have the media didn't report on this, but I saw this somewhere. Trump had reached an agreement with India, and India is technically a competitor to China. They're operating the same thing as China, and all Donald Trump is trying to do is, hey, we're too dependent on this person. Let's move and put some stuff here in India as a short-term kind of fix until we build up manufacturing back in the United States of America to at least a comparable level where if something happens, we can do it ourselves. We can shift processes to our stuff. So we're trying to migrate companies, instead of using Chinese goods, use India goods because they're competing essentially in the same thing. But, I digress. That was just a little geek thing from me. Let's continue.
Business people, like the gentleman you interviewed, stop ordering. China has no business model. Their business model is predicated on selling cheap, subsidized goods to the U.S. And if there is a sudden stop in that, they will have a sudden stop in the economy.
And liberals don't want to admit this, right? They like, I've seen, financial YouTubers overwhelmingly leans left. I'm just being honest with you. So when you listen to a financial YouTuber, they're talking about, oh my God, China's plan is working. They're de-dollarizing. De-dollarizing what? Let's see them do it for 6 months. Let's see them do it for a year. Can they maintain this? Maybe. But it's not going to hurt. Like, end of the day, I'm not saying that doing this on China doesn't hurt the U.S., but it's creating an incentive structure where, hey, national companies, I'm not folding. I'm not taking the tariffs off of China. You better figure something out. You're going to sit here and let your profits suffer, continually sticking your side with China? Nope. Your butt better start transitioning to other markets. You better use India. India just finished doing a trade deal. You better start moving orders over there. And this is the thing that financial YouTubers, they don't really see from their own personal interest. Because right now, this hurts them. They're seeing their stuff go down. They're like, oh my God, look, China's plan is working. Short-term thinkers. And this is what makes me starting to think that a lot of people are not really investors. I feel like I'm an investor. Maybe because I read Warren Buffett's stuff, so I tend to agree with his kind of investing philosophy. But a lot of people, they're day traders. They're week traders. They trade week to week.
So they will negotiate.
Well, look, some of the leaders of the big box stores, Walmart, Target, delivered a warning to President Trump that some of the shelves could be empty within a matter of weeks. I know you're looking forward, but this is a concern right now.
Sounds like you don't want to shift.
That's why we are negotiating these deals, and we're moving forward with this. And again, as the gentleman in Annapolis said, Martha, the goal is not to manufacture dog collars again in the U.S. That the president is looking forward to the jobs of the future, not the jobs of the past. The goal is to bring back high-performance manufacturing jobs or create high-performance manufacturing jobs. Right now,
how long does that take? I mean, that is such a concern. How long does it take to bring?
This is why I brought up India. Shift your orders to India. It's like you think a business don't have alternatives. If something goes wrong, you don't think they have a backup option? You really think these multi-billion-dollar, sometimes trillion-dollar companies don't have alternative plans, alternative backup plans if something goes wrong with their main source of inventory, main source of suppliers? Make it make sense. But they want to create this negative perception. Why? I don't know. Maybe they have some deal with China. Maybe they just find it easier. Maybe it's a bigger profit margin if they stick with China. They don't want to move somewhere else. But that's not our problem. And this is why I'm talking about this negative perception that it seems like Wall Street's in on it. And I don't blame Wall Street, because Wall Street, they vote, donate like 90% clip for the Democratic Party. So of course they're going to take the stance that's more preferable, that's more in the benefit of the Democrats than actually their customers and the Republican Party. Because at the end of the day, majority of people voted for Donald Trump. Donald Trump won the popular vote. So essentially, corporate America is going against the interests of American people. And they're going to sit here and pretending that no one, Trump supporters are somehow regretting the decision. When you look at polls, Trump supporters, 95% of them will still vote the same way, even with everything they know was going to happen up to this point. But the media wants to push this narrative of a Trump regret. Make it make sense. Make it make sense.
That to the U.S.
Well,
is there a plan?
Of course, but it's a process. Right now, the U.S. has a barbell economy. We have a very advanced financial system. We have a the exploration and development that is the envy in the world. On the other side, we are a natural resource economy led by energy, which the previous administration tried to stifle. And in between is where working class Americans have lost out. And we want to bring back these manufacturing jobs or create these manufacturing jobs of the future. And we are meeting with companies that want to do this every day.
And this is that moment of pain, or that transition with pain. But again, how long does that last? Is there anything you can say about that? How fast you can bring these manufacturing?
Well, look, Martha, it's a reallocation, because what we are doing, the federal government is shedding labor. We're trying to get the private sector to pick that up. But we have a very low unemployment rate. It's not like we have to create jobs. What we need to create are good paying jobs with fair trade. That is what the president's doing.
Let's.
And this is why I think many working class people are in favor of tariffs. Because if you look at the stats, people who made under, I think, six figures, majority of them voted for Donald Trump. This is why. The tariffs, the tariff plan he just articulated explains why. But Wall Street don't like it. But what's Wall Street demographics? You think they have a large percentage of people who work in that industry without a college degree? Nope. College educated people, they tend to vote for not Donald Trump, vote for the Democratic Party. They get taught by liberal economists about stuff. But when you ask them stuff about, Thomas Sowell, if you ask a economics major, a finance major, who Thomas Sowell is, they won't know who he is, because liberal economists, the liberal institution known as the college system, will only teach you things from a left-wing point of view. They only want to reference liberal economists, liberal way of thinking. So they have a very understanding of the economy that's very filtered through left-wing ideology. So when they see the tariffs, they say, oh my God, tariffs are going to cause inflation. I'm not seeing it. Maybe certain goods will cause inflation, but the demand for that stuff will go down. So how something will get inflated? Inflation only happens when you tariff something that's like essential for people's everyday life, like water. If our water came from somewhere else and we tariff the water coming from the source, yeah, that will cause inflation, because people need water. So they'll buy it regardless of the price. That will cause inflation. But if something becomes more pricier, people's buying behavior change. And this is the funny part, that people don't understand, and this is what Thomas Sowell understood very properly, and this is why I love Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell understands that when you change the incentives, you change behavior. If you make something more expensive, you change the behavior that less people will buy that thing. So how does it cause inflation? And this is why I'm like, it's a shame that a lot of economics majors, you study the economy, but you don't know who Thomas Sowell is, the author of Basic Economics. I'm just saying. But you let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. You heard mine. Let me know your thoughts and comments in the comment section below. I'd like to hear what your thoughts, your perspective on this matter. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Please share this video if you feel so inclined. It really does help me out in the algorithm. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.